Many thanks for staying with us on Village Square Africa. Now let's take a look at Ghana, where the country's organized labor has successfully secured a substantial increase in the public sector base pay, along with a significant rise in the minimum wage. Now, this momentous decision comes less than 24 hours before the finance minister is set to present the 2024 election year budget, adding an interesting twist to the country's political and economic landscape. Now, after months of intense debate and negotiations, the government, as well as the organized labor, have finally reached a consensus that marks a significant victory for the labor force. Now, this recent development undoubtedly raises a myriad of thought-provoking questions and considerations regarding its potential impact on Ghana's economy, the government's fiscal policies, and the overall well-being of the nation's workforce. Now, there are certain questions to put into consideration, which include: what were the key factors that led to successful negotiation? How exactly will this increase affect the overall impact of the economy in Ghana? And of course, the potential effect of the 22% rise in the minimum wage, not to talk of the decision that influences the upcoming 2024 elections, and so many more. Now, with such a significant increase in public sector base pay and the minimum wage, this announcement marks a major victory for the public sector workers in Ghana who have been protesting for so long. I remember a year ago, the government was proposing a 15% increase, which of course they refused, and now they're having a 22 and 23% increase. They have been long advocating for fair and equitable compensation for their hard work and their dedication, which of course they do deserve. Now, the increase in base pay will not only provide much-needed relief for the public service workers, but it will also serve as a catalyst for economic growth and development in the country. The decision also to raise the public service base pay by such a significant margin demonstrates the government's commitment to addressing the challenges that have been faced by public sector workers and also ensuring that they're fairly remunerated for their contributions to the nation. Now, this move reflects the government recognition as well of the vital role that the public service workers play in delivering essential services to the people of Ghana. The agreement between the government and the Public Labor Union is as a result of an extensive negotiation and dialogue that have been highlighting the power of collaboration and compromise in achieving a meaningful change. Now, like they say that you cannot change a thing or tackle a problem except you agree that there is a problem, and seeing that there is this form of collaboration between the labor union as well as the government is encouraging, not just to the labor union now, but also to the people of Ghana. And by working together, both parties have demonstrated their dedication to finding a common ground and reaching a solution that will benefit the entire public service workforce. Now, if you compare what's happening in Ghana to some other African countries, for Nigeria, for example, you see that instead of coming to a compromise like Ghana has just done, there's been a lot of strike action. So one can say that it is very expedient that other African countries especially learn from what is happening in Ghana. I mean, it took a long time to get here, looking at how they have been fighting this for a long time. The government at some point refused to come to an agreement that they deserved this much increase in the pay. But now you see that they have come to a consensus. Again, I did say that we need to answer some major questions, which of course subsequently as the story develops will have economists who will help us dissect the issue. You know, some questions like what factors led to the increase eventually, seeing how they've been pursuing it for a long time. But that notwithstanding, at the end of the day, they were able to come to a compromise. Now, the increase in base pay will not only provide immediate financial relief for public service workers, just as I mentioned earlier, but it will also have long-term implications for their quality of life and well-being. And it will enable them to better provide for themselves as well as their families. Now, instead of just continuing, like I said, this isn't about to be a monologue. We're going to have an economist, Professor John, the Dean of University of Cape Town, or Cape Coast School of Business, rather, in Ghana, who will help us understand this issue further. Thank you so much, Professor John, for joining us.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure, Professor John. Now, in my introduction, I did say about twice or three times that we need someone who is economically sound, especially when it comes to the dealings or the issues surrounding Ghana's economy, to help us understand, this issue on ground. Now, we see that this is a landmark progress. We see that the government has finally come to an agreement with the labor union to increase, the wage by 22% and, of course, minimum wage by 23. But I think the major question here will be, what were the key factors that led to the successful negotiation between the government as well as the organized labor that we now see this result?
Well, first of all, what has happened is not any breakthrough, it's not any extraordinary development. But our Public Financial Management Act, which was put in place in 2016, is a requirement that before budget is read, since labor issues are expenditure item, the agreement should take place before the budget is read so that will be captured in the budget. So, and that has been happening from 2017, 2018 up to date. So it is not anything out of the blue. It is just the normal course of engagement with the labor. In fact, this decision should have been a month earlier to allow for the budgeting process to be well fine-tuned. But I must say that it is rather late in the day before it was agreed upon. So that is the perspective of what has happened.
All right. Now, Professor John, if I may ask, now this, like you say, is not anything extraordinary. It's not something out of the blues, and it should have been done earlier. So what led to that delay that they couldn't come to a consensus before now, even, regardless of the fact that it should have been done? It's something that they were expecting.
Yeah, because the parties were not agreeing on a common figure. While they were, the labor unions were talking around 75%, and the government is also talking below that figure. And the reason being that we are in economic difficulties, and if what you ask to be paid is too high, that will by itself have negative effect on the finances of the country. So there is a need for a compromise. There is a need for both sides to sacrifice. So it is through that deliberation that ended up to the 23% for the first half of the year and 25% for the second half of the year. So it's largely because of the compromises that were not agreed upon early.
Right. Now, if I may ask as well, how exactly will this
and again,
okay, go ahead.
As a government, you will be looking at your expenditure, and then you also be looking at how this determination have effect on other players in the economy. Take the private sector, for example. Most private sector entities cannot pay what we had agreed upon today. It will be very difficult for some of them to pay. And if we want to even enforce that, it means that many people will be left out of job in the process. So you have to determine the wage that will also be accommodated by the private sector players. So those reflections were the things that actually delay the agreement.
All right. My final question will be, how exactly will this decision influence the upcoming 2024 election year budget? As we understand, the finance minister was about to present it, if he hasn't. How will this affect the 2024 budget?
I don't see the effect on the 2024 budget because this is a normal process that they have just engaged in. In any case, salary were to be increased anyway. Every year, salaries actually go up, but it's the quantum that we're talking about, what they want to agree upon. So it's just an expenditure item that has actually been approved by the agreement of labor. So for me, I don't see the far-reaching effect. Of course, since it's an agreement, government has looked at what it can pay given the economic conditions of the country. And labor has also agreed upon what the government wants to pay because of the reason of sacrificing to allow the economic situation to roll out. So I do not see the serious effect on this.
All right.
Unless the way we engage in employment in the country, we employ, for example, the finance minister said in the budget reading that we spent about 14 billion on compensation by the end of 2016, but now we are spending 37 billion. And he's creating the impression that that means that they are more caring to labor than the previous government, and that is not the case, because if you look at the number of employment that were done, which were not related to productivity, which were not related to prudent financial management, is mind-boggling. There are people on payroll. We are still dealing with ghost names, but these ghost names are being validated by officers on daily basis, on monthly basis. So these are issues relating to inefficient spending,
Right.
but it's not largely because of a massive improvement in the numbers, but we want to relate that to productivity also.
Okay. All right. Professor John Gatsi, Dean, University of Cape Coast School of Business in Ghana, thank you so much for your time with us, and thank you for joining us to discuss this as well.
And I'm very sorry for connecting late.
That's totally fine. We're glad that we could eventually have you join us to discuss this. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.